All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, Michael Bloomberg is many things, but we must all at least thank him for exposing the true danger to our democracy that corporate media poses. Yesterday, Bloomberg News editor-in-chief John Micklethwaite sent a note to staffers outlining how they will deal with their boss throwing his hat in the presidential ring. Many took notice of the fact that they would suspend their editorial board, but another stray line is actually what caught my eye. Micklethwaite writes that the news organization will, quote, continue our tradition of not investigating Mike, and that in keeping with their policy towards competitive financial companies, they will not investigate any of Bloomberg's rivals in the presidential race. Now that sounds like the ethical thing to do, but think about how much of a gift that Michael Bloomberg's corporate control over a major news organization is granting him. It is difficult to describe how much of an in-kind political donation it is to not have one of the largest news gathering organizations on the planet not investigate you while you're running for president. Now you may say, yeah, but they're not investigating anyone else. Well, that's really bad too. They're supposed to be investigating candidates. That's their job. But this isn't about Michael Bloomberg. All Bloomberg News did is say the quiet part out loud. We live now in a time where oligarchs of immense fortunes control media companies to shape the public environment to the benefit of their business. One of my particular favorite reactions to Bloomberg News' announcement was the indignant and surprise from the Washington Post journalists like this one. He calls the statement, quote, extraordinary. You know what's more extraordinary? That Jeff Bezos, one of the world's richest men, owns the Washington Post, the second most powerful newspaper in this entire country. And that the entire news media tells us that when Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders link that fact to the coverage of the newspaper, that they're outlandish conspiracy theorists. Jeff Bezos paid $250 million for the Washington Post. In effect, what he purchased was the right to stop the second most powerful newspaper in the United States from investigating his company, Amazon, and even better, that he could use that company to hire people who share a similar ideology to his own, which benefits his bottom line. Even better for Bezos, every aspiring journalist in the country wants to work at the New York Times or the Washington Post. Every single one of them will think twice before tweeting something negative about Bezos himself or investigating at Amazon while they're working at a different news organization. What I just laid out is worth hundreds of billions of dollars in benefit to the market cap of Amazon and Jeff Bezos personally. Just as Bloomberg News neutralizing of negative coverage is a financial boon to his campaign. As a friend of the show, David Sirota, noted after Bloomberg's announcement, every reporter covering 2020 knows that if they write a story scrutinizing Mike Bloomberg, they risk enraging a person who owns a sizable segment of the media job market. It's a tough situation for journalists and not a great dynamic for democracy. Corporate control of the media has turned our contemporary politics into covering the needs and the wants of the most powerful people in this country. And perhaps it's time that we think about whether it's appropriate at all to keep letting them do so. Mm-hmm. And you know, Crystal, I was thinking about this in particular, which is, you know, the Washington Post fact checker, right? And so they've got this fact checker, they're talking about the wealth tax. How are we actually supposed to trust anything that they write about
Absolutely.
that whenever their boss is the major person who loses under a wealth tax? Now, look, I actually have a lot of problems with the wealth tax, but how am I supposed to trust their coverage? They would say, oh, well, Jeff Bezos has never sent me an email personally saying not to do something. And I'm like, well, if a pro-wealth tax person existed, you think they wouldn't think twice before hiring him? I don't think so.
There are so many levels to this story. Right. And by the way, David Sirota, before he joined the Bernie campaign, well, actually, when he joined the Bernie campaign, he got smeared by a journalist for accusing him of working with Bernie and not, which was total BS. Meanwhile, these guys are going directly from Bloomberg Opinion over to work on his campaign. Where's the outrage about how long they've been working with him? Furthermore, to go even deeper beyond Bloomberg, which I think you do really effectively, pointing out, look, a lot of people, there aren't a lot of media jobs, and a lot of people are going to think twice about criticizing him, criticizing Amazon, et cetera. But another friend of the show, Zed Jelani, used to work at Center for American Progress on their supposedly independent journalistic site, think progress.
Right.
He posted a negative article about Bloomberg's girlfriend and got pushback from another friend of the show and guest of the show, Neera Tanden.
Right.
Because why? They were soliciting funds from Michael Bloomberg.
And I love how explicit that is.
Completely explicit.
Yeah.
I mean, just made completely clear. Meanwhile, Bloomberg has also given $1 million to the Atlantic Foundation, which publishers of Atlantic. So, I mean, this, like you put it, these oligarchs, you don't even always see the influence. It's not always so direct as their name literally being on the media outlet, but the influence and the control is just completely pervasive throughout our media and throughout think tanks and institutions throughout in Washington.
Right. Let me give you a non-political example. Amazon right now is trying to get a $10 billion cloud contract with the Pentagon, right? And now this whole thing, Trump is involved, the Pentagon's involved. How are we supposed to trust that the Washington Post is not in de facto lobbying by writing pro-Amazon articles in this contract dispute? Or what if they decide to go and investigate a rival to Amazon in their bid and their lobbying operation? Now, look, it's legitimate coverage, but maybe it benefits Amazon. I mean, his $250 million investment, it would pay for itself, 40 times over if that deal were to go through. How many more other deals are there like that? I mean, it's just over and over and over again. And these people have the gall to say that Bernie and Trump are conspiracy theorists for tying their coverage. I'm like, excuse me, you're the conspiracy theorist for telling us that has no effect on your coverage whatsoever.
They melted when Bernie dared to question Bezos' ownership of the Washington, but people melted down like this was the most outrageous, outlandish conspiracy theory claim, and now you see something like this, and it's like, oh, maybe Bernie wasn't so crazy on this one.
What happens if Jeff Bezos wants to run for president? Or even better, I mean, Jeff Bezos cares a lot about certain political issues. He has immense amount of interest in defeating a wealth tax. He has an immense amount of personal interest in defeating postage tax increases, about all these other things, or infrastructure reform, or the way that the coverage is managed. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. At the other time, how is the Washington Post supposed to investigate any business? Because guess what? Amazon competes on all front. How do we know that any of their articles about the retail industry are not in de facto helping the bottom line of the Amazon corporation?
And then there is zero reflection upon why so much of the public, when they hear Trump saying fake news, say, buy into that rhetoric. They think it's all about, oh, well, Trump, and this is unfair, and he's demonizing the media, et cetera, which is true. He is demonizing the media in a way that I think is dangerous and inappropriate. But there is zero self-reflection about why that critique would land with so many people, and not just people on the right, by the way, a lot of people across the country. Trust in the news media is so low, and they seem to have no idea why. It couldn't be us. Couldn't be us. We're doing everything perfect.
I love that they call people conspiracy theorists, and every sane person looking at home would go, yeah, there's something going on here. You know, they're like, no, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. That's a little weird. And you're not crazy. Don't worry. They make you feel crazy, but you're not crazy.
Yeah. Well, and then on the other hand, he's just dropping $30 million $37 million on an ad buy. Our democracy, totally not corrupt. It's all fine, guys. Next up on Rising. Senator Bernie Sanders says that recent 2020 candidate entry, Michael Bloomberg, is, quote, not going to get very far in this election.
And Sanders' National Press Secretary explains why that is and describes how the senator is building a movement to win. That when Rising continues.